Okay, in the name of God, most merciful, ever merciful, and may God's peace and blessings be upon His holy Prophet Muhammad and the purified members of his household and progeny. Okay, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So we are still discussing the problem of evil in the world. To segue from what you just mentioned. So what we tried to give until now is a number of very general, high-level answers that should apply to the big objections that one may have or may hear about why there are so many evils and problems in the world. We gave a little bit of a context piece last time we met, just to make sure that the reason why we're spending a little bit more time on this topic is clear to everyone by looking at the problem from different angles, and we can do a quick recap of that. So the intent from today is that we start drilling into the very concrete problems, because I think we gave the high-level stuff and we gave the generic answers. Now we want to start talking about maybe a little bit more concretely, practically speaking, and what people are actually going through in their lives, and give more of an answer than just, it's a play on words and it's not really evil. And okay, so these are the very high level, let's say more philosophical answers. But there are answers that are more concrete, and we go into the details. But before we give them, and inshallah when we give them, everything will be very clear. Before we give them, I wanted to do two things. So inshallah today we do one, and then the next time we do the second one, and we give the answers, inshallah. What we're going to try to do today, and I'm trying to keep it a little bit shorter because I think it's, as a topic, it requires a little bit of concentration. It's late in the day. I don't want to kind of overload with the information. The point here is that we actually digest and understand all the points so that we can apply them. So what we're going to do today is present a number, we're going to call them rules. And there's a reason why we're going to call them rules, so we're going to introduce that when we get to it. They're going to be very useful later. So that the topic is not just dumped on you entirely. We're going to split it into these two parts. So maybe very quick recap. I think last time we met, we presented something like perhaps 6 or 7, I think 7 reasons why we're studying this topic. So very quickly, without repeating the whole thing, maybe in 3 minutes, the reasons why we're talking about this problem of evil in the world. The first reason we said is actually a historical reason. And we explained that in the history of Islam, this problem became so big that people made the issue, because this issue falls under al-adl. So al-adl became one of the 5 main beliefs in Islam, especially for the adliya. So it became al-tawheed, al-adl, al-nubuwa, al-imama, al-ma'ad. Al-adl was not that before. Al-adl was not its own asl. It was not its own foundational pillar of beliefs. It was al-tawheed, al-nubuwa. Where do we come from? Which is the question of tawheed. How are we supposed to live? And everything related to that, that's under nubuwa, everything that has to do with religion. And then al-ma'ad, afterlife, the hereafter, the day, judgment day, all of that. That's the third. Where are we going and what's going to happen and how are we supposed to live given that? These are the 3 foundations. But then 2 more foundational beliefs were added. One of them is al-adl, one of them is al-imama. So we're not at imama yet. We'll get back to it when we get there, inshallah. We'll go over prophethood, and then imama is an extension of prophethood. So al-adl, one of the reasons why it was elevated is because of the huge issues and disagreements and problems in early Islam that were about this topic of divine justice. Is our God a just God or not? Is this world a just world or not? Is there injustice in it? Is there evil in it? What do we do with these problems of shurur, evils? And I'll talk today about that very quickly, because the term can lead to confusion, and it did not used to be all lumped together under the problem of evil in the world. They used to look at it from 2 angles, and we'll explain that. So the first reason why this is an important topic is it reflects the entire history of the Islamic thought. Okay, so historic reason, let's call it, or historical reason. The second reason, very quickly, and I think that's the entire purpose for why we're here, is that we're trying to have a correct belief system. So we are studying this topic because this is one of the topics that pretty much any human being should at some point deal with. It's an important belief. So regardless of what your answer to the question is, the question should arise in your mind at some point if you have a mature mind, if you've been confronted to real problems in life, if you've ever wondered about deeper things than the superficialities of your daily routine. At some point you have to wonder about the challenges, the difficulties, the problems in the world. You see wars and you see disease and poverty and oppression. You know people that are close to you that may get very sick or they may die, and this makes you wonder, like, what is behind all of this and why is this happening and how is this possible in a just world and how can a merciful, just God allow all of this to happen? Okay? So, in order to have a correct belief system, you're supposed to address these major issues. If you don't have an answer to these questions, there's something lacking in your belief system. Like you don't have a complete belief. There's some stuff that you're going to leave hanging. And because of that, it may trigger all sorts of other issues. Okay? So that's the second reason. The third reason is, as we said, we've spent a lot of time talking about the existence of God and then the attributes of God. For instance, we said Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alim, so He has knowledge, He has power, He has will. The problem is that al-adl, which is, as we said, it should be one more trait, one more attribute of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The truth is that, if you remember, we said some of them are more important than others because some of the attributes, they derive from others. So if you don't understand al-adl, if you do not understand divine justice properly, you are going to have problems with a lot of the other attributes. You're going to have huge problems with al-hikmah. Allah Hakim, Allah has wisdom, you're going to have huge problems with that. If you go to rizq, you're going to say there are huge problems with that. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, does He divide, does He bestow, does He grant, does He give rizq and sustenance and mercy and anything that He gives? Does He give it in a just manner, or is it random? Does He do whatever He feels like doing and there's absolutely no order, there's no system, there are no rules? How is this working? How is this fair? So it has ramifications on everything we've said until now. So this is basically kind of like a missing link that is going to, inshallah, connect the dots on a lot of the things that we've said before. Very quickly too, this is the link as well with things that we have not said yet, which is the next topic, as we said, is going to be the topic of prophethood. As soon as we're done with this, we're going to talk about what does it mean to be a prophet, what is revelation, what is infallibility, what is a miracle, how do we know if someone is a prophet or not, how do we determine if it's a false prophet or a true prophet. This is general prophethood, so this applies to all prophets. And then we have specific prophethood. So this is when you look into a specific prophet, like the specific miracle of Musa alayhi salam, or the specific infallibility of Yusuf alayhi salam. Okay, so this, you have to look at a specific prophet, and then the most relevant for us is Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. How do we determine that he is a prophet? What is his miracle, and how do we know that it's a miracle and we can rely on it, and so on and so forth. In order to go there, you need to have a clear understanding of divine justice. So divine justice has a link with prophethood, and we'll see that inshallah when we'll get to prophethood, but it needs to be clear now. And then the next one is, and even more clear of a link, is what happens in the afterlife. If your idea of divine justice is not clear, you are going to have issues with what's going to happen in the afterlife as a belief system. Is it going to be fair or not? Are the rewards, are the punishments, are the manners in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to deal with human beings, are they compatible with divine justice or not? So this, of course, the part that we are discussing right now has to do with this world, because this is what the majority of people are concerned with. But the secondary part of that is, of course, this has huge ramifications on the afterlife. If this is not a fair God, if it's not a just God, this is going to extend into the afterlife. And the problems there are going to be a lot bigger than the ones we have here. Because it's infinity and it's so on and so forth. Okay? And we'll talk about that inshallah. And then we added to this entire discussion, looking at it from a completely different angle, we said that the problem of evil in the world, the problems, challenges of the world, have very big effects, ramifications, repercussions on our psychology. If you are someone who believes that the world is just full of these problems and it's random and there's no meaning behind them, sooner or later you are going to be confronted with some very depressing situations that will depress you, that will make you completely lost about what's the meaning of everything, what's the significance, why is this happening, and what am I supposed to do with it? If you have an understanding of the fairness of God, of the justice of God, of the type of world we live in, of why there are the problems that we have in the world, and that you see that this is not random, that there is a meaning behind it, that there is a retribution, that there is a way for all of this at some point to be rebalanced into something very fair. If this is your outlook on life, it's a completely different outlook than if your outlook is, this is just the way it is, you live and it's a really difficult life and then you die and that's it. Okay? So this is a psychological reason that is associated with what today everything under the heading of mental health. Social. And we said simply by saying that divine justice, al-adl, making it into one of the main foundational beliefs in our belief system, we are basically reminding ourselves and the world, when you announce that this is my set of beliefs, this is how important justice is in my set of beliefs, in my interpretation of the world, in what matters to me. If I had to say 5 words to say everything I believe in, well, the second one is fairness and justice. That says a lot about where you're supposed to be coming from in terms of a belief system, a value system. Okay, so this is more of a social reason, because justice has huge ramifications in society. And of course, this leads to social action and responsibility and awareness and so on and so forth. And as we said, perhaps the biggest reason for discussing this is that this is one of the most important objections that we find today against belief in God. There are some people who are going to even be able to prove the existence of God through other means, and they will be convinced by it. But because they are confronted with the problem of evil in the world and they can't resolve it, they go back to rejecting God or the existence of God. Because they are confronted with the ultimate question of, how could a God, if he is truly powerful, he is truly all-knowledgeable, if he is truly willing and free in his action, if he is truly merciful, how can he let all of this happen? Okay, and this is what we're going to answer in a lot more detail than we have until now. And inshallah, it's going to go very quickly. But if we do it in a very detailed manner, it's going to take a very long time. So what I'm proposing to do is that today what we start with is to present what we said we're going to call rules. Why are we talking about rules? I'm calling them rules because the truth is each one of these is going to be a very big topic that we are going to summarize in a few words. We're just going to say it in, 4, 5, 6 words. That becomes your rule. Some of these we've already covered. We've taken lectures to cover them. Some of them we have not covered yet. And we most likely will not cover. Okay? And the reason is, each one of these would require a very lengthy, very detailed discussion. We don't have that time because we want to resolve this issue of evil in the world quickly. So are we going to give a detailed description and proof and evidence for each one of these proofs? No. Not here. Maybe in the future we will. For some of them you will see we have already covered them. But not in the words we're going to say. But you will right away recognize what we're saying and we're going to point them out. Does it mean that these are not valid because we're not providing the evidence now? We don't have the time to spend 2-3 hours, providing all the proofs for each one of them? No, they're valid. Okay? We're just going to go quickly through them because the point here is evil in the world. These rules are not necessarily related to the problem of evil in the world. But we're going to use them as general rules, and then the next time when we meet, we're going to apply the rules to the evils in the world. And we're going to see the outcomes. And it will be very, very easy once the rules are just applied. Now I'm going to give you the key to these rules. The key to these rules, why they're good, even though we're not going to spend 3 hours to establish the logical necessity or validity of each of them, is that hopefully you will see with me that each one of these rules should be very intuitive. A normal human being who is not just trying to disagree and argue and just have a very long debate about a topic, each one of these rules should reflect the manner in which we generally interact, understand the world. Okay? We're not trying to be really philosophical here. We're trying to be practical. So these rules are supposed to be practical rules, reflective of, generally speaking, how human beings view and understand what is good, what is wrong and what is right, what is good, what is bad, what is evil, what is not evil. They're supposed to be representative of those. We're going to put these rules in place, and the point is, we're going to take them the next time, and we are going to apply them to the evils that we find in the world. And the answers should come out very quickly. Where does it fall? And we're going to see that there is not a ton of answers. There's perhaps 4 or 5 categories in which all the evils in the world are going to fall, and none of them are going to be evil. And it's not going to be plays on words. So let's start with a distinction that we have to make before we talk about the rules. In Arabic, the problem of evil in the world, if you go back to the books of theology, beliefs, philosophy, a lot of the lectures that you hear, they call this ash-shurur, shubhat ash-shurur. Okay, the evil in the world, the problem of evil in the world. In Arabic, they call it ash-shurur. The problem is the term shurur is ambiguous. And if we just keep it at this level, which is what I have done until now, every time we've talked about it, I've kept it at this ambiguous level, just referring to all the problems in the world as evil in the world, and that's it. We're going to put them, we're not going to make a huge categorization and a huge list of different evils. Just 2. Just 2 types, because that's fundamental. And this is going to be very important for you every time you're faced with an evil or a problem or a challenge, or someone says this is wrong, this is bad, this is... Start by making it fall into one of these 2 categories. Okay? In Arabic, the shurur is split into 2 categories. Category 1 is what has darar, which means harm. Okay? So an evil, when we say the problem of evil in the world, what is evil? It may mean, when someone says this is evil, it's because it generates harm. That's one category. Keep that in mind. So anything that is harmful may be evil. So is evil equal to harm? No. One type of evil is that which is harmful. Is that everything? No, there's another category that happens to fall under the general heading of evil that may or may not be harmful. And this is the whole distinction that we're trying to make first. Okay? These 2, there's no equal sign between these 2 categories. There's no necessity between them. So one type is things that are harmful, darar. The second type is things that are, in Arabic, they call them qabih. Qabih is a philosophical term. Al-qubh is a philosophical term. It means, when we say it in English, the proper way to say it, is things that ought not to be. What does that mean? Things that are morally wrong. Okay? So if you think about something in itself, you say, is there a moral wrong in this? Okay? Slowly I'm going to remove the term moral, but you're going to now have it in your mind. Every time I say wrong, you're going to remember I mean moral wrong. Okay, what do we mean? If you see an injustice, if you see oppression in the world, you can look at an act and you say, is there something fundamentally wrong with that action? At an abstract level, when someone is committing an injustice against another human being, just by looking at it, can you say this is wrong or not? Alaykum assalam wa rahmatullah. This is a moral wrong. Okay? Things that you can just look at with your reason, with your human mind, and you say this is wrong, it shouldn't be. You're going to say that this is, in Arabic they would say this is qabih. An example of qabih, for instance, someone who wastes their time. They decide to spend 10 hours doing something that everybody agrees is just a complete waste of time, not harming anyone. Okay, with reason, moral wrong and right, when you look at that, you say there's a moral wrong here. It's morally wrong to waste your time. Have you harmed? There's no harm. Okay? So this is where, by these examples, we start to see it is possible to harm without being qabih, and I'll give you an example, and it's possible to be qabih without being wrong. How? Let's say someone has transgressed, done something, abused someone else. They go in front of the judge and the judge punishes them. Says you have to pay back $1,000. Or he punched you in the face, you're now allowed to punch him back in the face. Okay, let's say that's the judgment. If you go kind of anywhere in the world, unless someone wants to argue and make a whole thing, generally speaking, basic human principle. Someone hit you in the face, you hit them back in the face in the same manner. Same force, cause same amount of damage. That's the intent. Did you cause harm or not? You did cause harm. You hit them and it hurt. Is that a moral wrong? You can't determine if it's a moral wrong or not unless you know the context. The context is this was in retribution, or this was a punishment to a previous act, a prior act. So is this an act that falls in the category of ought not to be, should not be, moral wrong? No. So when we talk about the problem of evil in the world, let's start by distinguishing. There are things that are morally wrong, and there are things that cause harm. Sometimes the thing that causes harm is also morally wrong. And sometimes the thing that is more wrong also causes harm. But not always. Okay, so when we look at something, the evil needs to be split in two. Is it harmful? And is it a moral wrong or not? Okay, if you say like this is disloyalty, this is injustice, this is oppression, right away, moral wrong, moral wrong, moral wrong. May or may not lead to harm. We have to look. Okay, so that's the first distinction. We're now talking about the definitions of evil. And I won't spend more time on that. There's more we can say, but this should be enough. With that, we can now jump into the rules. These rules, we're going to say them quickly. We're not going to spend a ton of time on each. If they're not clear, ask for clarification. Otherwise, as we said, we are not trying to prove them philosophically today. Okay, we don't have time for that. And there are 9 of them. Okay, so I'm not expecting people to memorize them by heart. And I'm hoping that you will see that for all of them, you should be able to agree with them intuitively. Just like when we said, someone may argue that if someone hits you in the face, you should not hit them back in the face. Of course we can argue. And maybe there's something better to do, there's a higher, but basic human intuitive rationality, without going into charity and without going into generosity and some higher values of spirituality and something else, there's no issue there. Rationally, there is no issue in hitting someone back in the face just like they hit you in the face. Okay? If there is an issue that's imposed from the outside, let's say it that way. So, as we said, why are we talking about rules? Because we want to summarize the whole discussion very quickly in maybe 2 sittings and we're done. Okay, so we're not going to go into all the evidence and all the proofs and arguments for each one of these rules. One last point before we mention the rules. In order to solve the problem of evil in the world, and we will repeat that, inshallah, next time so that it's fresh, there are a few things that we have to kind of take for granted. Because we don't want to talk about the topic in forever. There's a few things that let's accept for now, and hopefully they have become clear to all of you. The reason I'm mentioning this is that in case you are in this kind of debate, or you're listening to 2 people, or reading a book, or watching a movie, or a debate, or whatever, and you see that the problem of evil in the world is being discussed. I'm going to give you 3, we're going to call them axioms, okay? So these things that you have to believe in, suppose that they are true, take them for granted, and if you feel that 2 people are discussing the problem of evil in the world, and these 3 issues have not been resolved first, the problem is, it's a waste of time to discuss the problem of evil in the world. Because you need to solve these 3 problems first. Okay, we're not going to discuss them now. They should be very clear to you, and you'll see it, inshallah, when we mention them. The first problem, or the first issue that should be very clear to everybody, is that this world has a creator. That's one. I'm not going to waste time discussing whether there is evil or not in the world if I still don't know whether you believe in the existence of a God, and a God with certain attributes. So this God has to have knowledge, has to have power, has to be able to act freely. It has to be an independent, autonomous, self-sufficient God. The God that we presented. If that's not the God we're discussing, why are we talking about the problem of evil in the world? What's the issue? There's no issue of problem of evil in the world. You know, let's say you're a materialist. You don't have the problem of evil in the world. That's not a problem to you. The world just is, and it's material interactions. There's no way for you to say they're evil or not. You can't say something is morally wrong or not if all there is just matter. There's only a discussion about evil in the world if there's a personal God who decides himself to act in a certain way. Yes?
So I thought this is an argument they use to say that God doesn't exist. No?
So it's 2. There's 2 types. There are rububiyin, these are people who will believe in a God, but not the personal God who sends religions and all of that. They may believe in a God, but they say, yeah, it could be a God that is kind of evil and a jerk. That's possible. But today, this is a minority. The majority of those who talk about evil in the world, they are trying to show that that God does not exist. And well, inshallah, we're going to answer that. But we have to agree that this is what we're discussing.
So basically, it's a matter world and there's no evil. But if there is a God, why would he be evil?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. There's like 4 different big ways to formulate the question. And I'm like trying to skip through. But yes, fundamentally, that's what it is. If this is a merciful, powerful God as you claim it to be, then how come there is this evil? How would he allow, or how would he, even worse, how would he do all of this evil? Why would he create the evil? Why would he do it? Or why would he, if he's not doing it, why does he let it happen? Where is he in all of this? Okay? That's one. The second thing. The second issue is, and again, this one we talked about, and I don't want to repeat it. We said it's kind of a philosophical discussion. That was the source of the whole problem of evil and divine justice in Islam, which is, can our reason, can our human mind recognize good and bad in itself, or do we need religion to tell us this is good and this is bad? We talked about that. Okay? And we said actions, not the details, but actions in general, the actions that carry an intrinsic good and bad in themselves. Something, for instance, like charity, or something like re-establishing justice after you've seen injustice. We said like any human being sitting somewhere and you see there's an orphan in the street. Let's take like the worst case scenario. So just make it very clear. There's an orphan sitting alone in the street. Someone passes by, gives them like a piece of fruit or bread. The next person comes and steals it from them and hits them and takes it away and goes away. You're just sitting and watching this whole scenario. And then someone else comes and does something to that person and takes it back and gives it back to the orphan. Anyone who watches that scenario should be able to, without, whether they are a religious person or not, whether they believe in a scripture and a God or not, they should be able to say there is something good that happened here, there's something then bad that happened, and then something else good that happened. Right? This part is what we have been talking about when we said, can the human mind on its own recognize some things, good and bad on its own? This does not mean that my mind can tell me I have to pray and the prayer has to be in al-fajr and it has to be ruk'atin. This is not the same discussion. Now we're talking about moral wrong and right. Salat al-subh, ruk'atin at fajr is not a moral wrong and right. Okay? It's a imposed law. It's a convention. It's just like when a society decides that we're going to put a red light here and you're going to stop at the red light. They could have chosen another color, but they decided that it's a light and that it's red. And these are the laws around it. There's no moral reason for this. It's a convention. People agreed and imposed, and that's it. Yeah.
But you said the person doesn't have to be religious. But isn't it religion that's showing us that this is morally wrong or right?
No, so this is where we say our religion, our instinct or nature recognizes the moral right and wrong, and our religion confirms it. But it's not our religion that's making this act wrong. This act is wrong in itself. And our religion confirms that this is wrong. And so it's going to add drivers and motivations and incentives to do or not to do. So it's going to give you more incentive. If you help someone, if you give charity, religion says, and this is a good act in itself. Oh, and by the way, I'm going to motivate you more to do even that act, which is already good in itself, and I'm going to give you a reward for it. Okay? Or the opposite. This is something that's bad in itself. It's wrong in itself. And to even help you further, because we're going to talk about that inshallah, about this problem of the difficulties in life, and what does it mean when we say something is difficult? It's because there's something attractive in doing the wrong. Okay? There's a reason why this person did what they did. There's always a reason. That's always a battle. You're always choosing. So religion will come and say, layer one, I recognize with you, human being, I recognize that this is wrong. Everybody should see that this is wrong. And this should be enough. But religion is going to say, no, this is not enough. I'm going to help you even more. I'm going to tell you if you go there and you do that, I'm going to punish you. So now you have an incentive. In addition to recognizing it's just bad in itself and that you should not do it in the first place, religion is going to motivate you not to do it further by saying, and if you do, I'm going to punish you if you do it. But it should not even have to do that in reality. Okay? That was the second. And so the difference here, like we said, like the case of the red light. The red light is not a moral right or wrong. It's an imposed. If you come to religion, let's say we come to religion, the whole discussion about whether you can play chess or not. So let's say there's a scholar that says you are not allowed to play chess in Islam. Okay. So is there a moral wrong with playing chess? No. This becomes a convention. This is something imposed by religion on you, but there's no moral wrong or right. This is part of the test. This is part of, it's no different than society. In one society, they decide to say, green light, you go, red light, you stop. Which is different than saying if you kill someone, that's a bad action. This is a moral wrong. Any human being will recognize that. Okay? I know that's a whole discussion. I'm not saying it is or isn't. Go back to your scholar and look up their rasala. Okay? Which is different than saying, for instance, an injustice. You see an injustice, any human being will recognize it. I'm just trying to make it clear that there are moral wrongs and rights, And those are instinctive to human beings. And then there are other things that are by convention. Okay? That's the second point. So there is a creator in the world, personal, with all the traits we described. One. So we're not going to talk about all of that because we already have. Should be clear. But if those 3 points are not clear, the third one being that human beings have the freedom to choose how they act. And we spent enough time on that we don't want to repeat it. Every human being should feel intrinsically that they are capable, intuitively, internally. You should feel that when you act, when you're performing an action, it is actually you who is performing that action. And then you're not being controlled by remote control from outside. Okay? No one can say, like, why did you do it? I say, it wasn't me. My arm was moving on its own, and my legs were moving on their own, and I slapped him in the face. Okay? And that's an issue. And we said, if we go back to a purely materialistic theory, understanding of the world, they have some explaining to do. Because they say it's all chemical interactions, physical interactions, genetic interactions, leading to every act. It's a cause and effect. It's predetermined. You can't change anything about that. Matter cannot explain free will. End of story. Go back and research it to death, and you'll see if you can find any argument against that one. So those 3, we're going to call them axioms. We're going to call them things that we're taking for granted without spending any more time trying to prove them. Okay? So those 3 in mind, we're now going to go into the rules. We said that there are 9 rules.
We're not on the rules yet?
We're going to start the rules. No, we're not. Now I'm going to start the
What
rules.
were those 3 then?
I call them axioms. Okay? So an axiom is, and this is the reason why I said those, I'm making a distinction. It's a good question. Maybe I went a little fast. I'm saying this is good for you, but it's also good if you listen to a debate or you are in a debate and someone enters with you and starts like, well, how do you explain the problem of evil in the world? I would start by saying, well, first of all, do you believe in God? Or not? 1. 2, do you believe that we are able to distinguish between moral wrongs and moral rights or not? 2, which should be very secondary and quick. And do you believe that we have a free will? And we are freely ourselves choosing every action. We're going to need this. If the person says no, it's predetermined, I'm not going to discuss the problem of evil in the world. There's no point. If the person does not believe that every human being is free to do what they want, I'm not going to be able to staple the responsibility of their action on them. I'm going to bring everything back to God. Which, I need this as a very important point. We need an answer for the rest, but as human beings, we're different. I'm not like a tree or a mountain or an earthquake. I need an explanation for human action. And human action is a free action. A human being is conscious and free. They know what they're doing and they still do it. And they have been given the power to do it. Okay, so to go there, I need to agree with the person that this person is free, right? We agree both that they chose to do this action, right? Okay, now we can talk about the problem of evil in the world. So which evil are we talking about? And depending on which evil, you follow the rule and it falls in one of the explanations. Okay? Yes.
I just wanted to thank you because actually, if I didn't know that things are naturally in themselves are good, and that God imposes instrumental motivation to do so, I wouldn't have known because last week I came across the Euthora's dilemma that they teach in philosophy in university, and if I had not known the answer, the book never tells you the answer. It just tells you the dilemma, which makes you even more. It complicates it in your head.
So what's the dilemma?
It's our actions good because God says so, or God says so because they are good, in like a simple form.
So this question was the origin of the big difference or disagreement between Ash'ara and Mu'tazila, who are the biggest 2 groups of belief in Islam. There are 4 madhahib of Sunnis in law, and the Ja'fari madhab, So we have 5 in law, so in practice. And in beliefs, usually people only talk about law. So they say there are Hanbali, Maliki, Hanafi, Shafi'i, and Ja'fari. And no one talks about the beliefs. In beliefs, it doesn't follow those. You may be Hanbali, but usually you're going to be Ash'ari, okay? But generally speaking, Ash'ara and Mu'tazila have nothing to do with those 4. This is how you apply the law. This is what you believe. And what you believe, you fall in only 2. You're either Ash'ara, who believe that it's only bad because God said it is. It's only bad because God or the religion or Islam said, don't do it. And it's only good because God said. This is what the Ash'ara say. Mu'tazila say, no, it's your reason. And then the problem, so this is what the dilemma. The problem is, so there's something that's being imposed on God. No, it's not. It's the nature of the thing in itself. God created it in that manner. It has its own good or bad within itself. It's not your reason that is being imposed on God. And that's the problem that they're trying to get to, and that becomes the dilemma.
And they try to make it look like God is ironic.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Anyways, it's a good one. Okay, so the rules. After the axioms, so the axioms, as we said, they're not the rules, Sayyid. The axioms are not the rules. It's a good question. But make sure that those 3 are very clear before you enter into the discussion of...
Like a checklist before any discussion.
Yes. Now what are we trying to do with the rules? We're going to give ourselves a set of rules that allows us to quickly, when we're going to do it, apply when we see an evil. And given those rules, the evil is going to land in a category. And the categories, we're going to see them next week. The categories, there's not a ton of them. There's maybe 4 or 5. And the categories don't end up creating evil in the world. So these rules are going to create the categories, and once we apply them, everything falls under those categories. Okay? Rule number 1. This one should have become clear now, so we're not going to spend too much time on it. But for someone who believes in God, and the God that we established, the God that we proved, if you believe that it is a wise God, if you believe that it's a self-sufficient God, a God that does not need any other creature, entity, I can't say creature, any other entity to exist, a God that has no needs, that's why we say it's an absolute, that's why we said a necessary being, that kind of God will never do the ought not, will never do the moral wrong. That's rule number 1. Okay? Why? We talked about that, but in summary we said, if any actor, any agent, any actor does something, someone who doesn't act, they do something, there has to be a reason for doing something. Even when we do, or we don't do, there's always an answer. There's always a reason. To do this moral wrong, to do the qabih, to do the thing that you should not do, here are the possibilities. Either you say this God does not know, or that God knows but can't help it, or he knows and he has the power but he has no will, he doesn't feel like it. And we already answered all of those given the attributes that we gave when we proved them one by one. And we said the God that we believe in must be, by necessity, it must be an all-knowledgeable God. And we spent a lot of time talking about the knowledge of God. Therefore, he cannot not know. Okay, so that's not cannot be the reason why you do the evil. You can't say he's doing evil because he doesn't know. And we can't say he's doing the evil because he knows, but he can't. He can't help it. Because we proved that that entity, the necessary being, is also all-powerful. Right? And we also proved, that's 2, we also proved that it cannot be a foolish entity, because we call that wisdom. Otherwise, all actions, we said, he has power, he has will, so does he do anything he feels like doing all the time? No. Everything is done based on wisdom. And we said wisdom is what? is giving everything what it needs for its purpose. If you keep that in mind, you will never have any reason to produce what they're referring to as evil. That's rule number one. And we talked about that, so we're not repeating. Okay? There's a couple of reasons we've already established. Yeah.
Do we have to establish those, like the evidence for it when we're
No,
discussing?
no, not necessarily. But ideally, yes. If you really want to go into the details with someone, of course. But you won't necessarily have to. Okay? You'll see the categories may or may not be entirely satisfying for the person who doesn't want to believe in God. But logically, there will be no more evil. You cannot just say it's evil. Evil has to fall into one of these categories, and none of these categories have anything morally wrong with them. And can they be harmful? Sure they can. There can be harm. But we said there can be harm without being morally wrong. And we gave examples, and there will be others. Okay? The second rule. The second rule is that, and we talked about that, we said there is no creature that really has a right on God. In what way? Is that if you are something that has been created by God, you can't really go back to God and say, I have a right over you. You are trespassing on my right. You have no right. And the example I asked you to do is to create something in your mind. Let's say I asked you to create, let's say, an apple or a little, I don't know, snowman in your mind. And then do whatever you want to do to that snowman. Don't tell me what you're doing. Okay? Can that snowman morally, can that snowman come back and say you are, trespassing, abusing of my rights? Does that snowman have any rights upon you? Or not? Do we have any legal system in the world that says you cannot do as you want to with anything that you create in your own mind? No.
What do you mean create in your own mind?
Imagine it. Close your eyes and create a snowman right now.
Yeah, but like
And then take a bomb and make it go through his head. I don't know what to say. Yes,
all
yes.
in my imagination?
Yes?
Like not in real life.
Because you can't create
Even if you
something
made
in
a
real
snowman
life.
in real life.
You understand?
That's the
Yeah, but I want to go further. I want someone who can manipulate entirely something.
Like,
Do you understand? Because I want to say,
But when I create something,
yeah.
I give it feelings, like if it's living, of course.
Okay, his snowman has
I
feelings.
give it feelings,
Okay.
Then that, like,
You're gonna feel bad when you're gonna
like
do it.
exactly kind of thing.
So your snowman in your mind, does it have feelings?
Yes.
Okay. So
If I can create anything, why not?
yeah, that's what I want you to do. Does that snowman really have rights on you?
Yeah, it kind of does. Because
Bro, so if
I-
there's
look-
something to it, are we allowed to take you to jail?
That's what he's saying. Like, is there a law?
Can I say, yo, what are you doing to your stomach? You're not allowed doing that.
yeah, I would say you would, because like
I go to jail then. I know what you did to the snowman.
Look, man, I anticipate a lot of questions when I prepare these talks. That was completely. You took me out by surprise. Yes, someone.
so it's like when a father creates a son,
Yeah.
that son has rights on him.
Yes.
Is that really considered creation or?
No. Yeah. So this is what the son has rights on the father because the son has not been created. That's why the closest thing I can say is create something in your mind. We can't create anything in the outside world in the way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala creates. Which is you create from nothing. Like the snowman that you're creating is not from nothing. It's based on pictures and things and experiences you've had in your life, and you can put them together in a way that creates a snowman. Yeah.
My question is, do we have rights on God?
Yeah. So the short answer is no, we don't.
We don't?
No.
Does God say we don't?
But wait.
So
doesn't
I'm going to
God
say two
impose on
exceptions.
himself?
Yeah, so there are two exceptions to that, and I hadn't mentioned them. I just want to explain, but then I have this snowman with feelings here. Yeah.
My point is from the philosophy of the creation of God creating everything, right? Being, is from his intrinsic generosity, right?
Mhm.
So from his intrinsic generosity, could it be possible that he allow us to have rights on him, or
Mhm.
to?
So there are two exceptions to us the statement, the rule. It has two exceptions. So that's in the explanation of the rule. The rule is nothing has rights on God except two. So in Arabic they say aqli and ja'li. So what's aqli? It's a rational exception, which is قبح العقاب بلا ذنب. It is not befitting of Allah, it's not befitting of anyone to punish, which is different than harm, to punish without sin, to punish without mistake. That's a rational rule. That's one. Two, if Allah says, I have self-imposed, if I've created a rule, look at she. You saw something?
Yeah, it's fine.
It's not going to attack me?
No.
Okay.
As long as it's not a snowman, it's fine.
Okay. If we say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala imposed a rule on himself, كتب ربكم على نفسه الرحمة. He self-imposed mercy on himself. Okay, that's different. We're not saying anyone has a right. He's saying he imposed something on himself, which is different. Okay? So one is he doesn't do anything that's not befitting. And the really only one that falls here, that we should keep in mind for the problem of evil in the world, is it's not befitting to punish without sin, to punish without mistake. One. And two, okay, you with me?
Yeah.
And two, if he self-imposes, if he says, these are things that I promise never to do. And it's not that I have a right over him, I have no right. He created a rule for himself, that he will never do something. He will always do something. And that's good. Has nothing to do with me. Okay? Yeah.
Never do something like what? Like a mistake or like what? Like what?
No, like for instance, how he will treat his creatures. That's the point of the evil.
So basically, if I promise the snowman something,
Yeah.
then he has the right over me and that.
He doesn't have a right.
Promised, you just
But if I promised him it,
Yes. So to simplify it, you can say he has a right, but he has no right. Whether he exists or not, until you created a rule for yourself that you will always follow.
I heard this saying that it says, whenever somebody says something and
Yeah.
then they say but,
Yeah.
then erase everything they said before it.
Okay, but that's just a saying. Yeah. This is just for talking.
No,
I don't.
It's right.
Yeah,
though.
yeah.
It's
So what did I
basically
say? But when
Like it's like you have no right over the creator
Except.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So basically, there's you can't don't look at that on its own.
Yes, that's true. Yeah, that's what we're saying.
Yeah.
So
except-
God, as a creature, you have no right over God.
except.
Okay. Alaykum assalam wa rahmatullah. So what are the two exceptions?
Is if the creature punishes without
The creator.
sin,
Of
without
the creator. Of the
if
creator.
the creator punishes without a mistake.
Yeah.
And
Who really you should say, to be clear, if it's the owner punishes without sin. That's how it says. Yeah, to be technically accurate.
and
The second is you
second one,
self-impose.
if he self-imposes
Yeah.
on himself, then you have the right to tell him
So to make it easier for you, the truth is these two don't fall here. Okay, I'm summarizing. The but is just because I'm trying to collapse a lot of things together in a rule for you. Okay? The truth is nothing has a right over God because he's a creator. End of story. That's done. Now we go to... Yeah, we're in the second one. I thought we would move a lot faster. Okay. Now, there is another rule that has nothing to do with any of this. It's how does God work? And we could take that one, which is Allah is never going to punish without mistake, without sin. We could put it under the first one. We could take it and put it under the first rule, which is Allah will never do qabih. Because he's not ignorant, because he's all-powerful, so he has knowledge, he has power, he has will, and he's self-sufficient. So nothing from outside of him should push him to ever do something that he should not do, that is not befitting to do. And that includes punishing without mistake. Okay, that's the truth. This Ani, I'm trying to say it in a way that's more simple, that everybody gets it. So Ani, I made them sin of saying but or except.
Yeah.
Okay? Because we're trying to make it very concrete. The concrete thing is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So here, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as a creator, there is no right over him.
That's if we don't look at anything else, basically.
Yeah, and that's the truth. He's the ultimate creator. He creates from nothing.
Of course.
Your snowman does not have a right over you. And if you say that I imposed a rule, that's not your snowman. There's still no right. You didn't give the right to the snowman.
That's an addition after I create.
And it's something imposed by you on yourself. It's not the right.
How about the first thing? That one isn't imposed on me. That came intuitively.
Yes. And the first one is it's not befitting. And that falls under husn qubh aqli. Is the thing in itself wrong? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not do it because He has no reason to do it. Okay? That's rule 2. Rule 3. Rule 3 is if there is someone who does an act, they are responsible for the act and the effects of the act. Clear? Clear. Let's make it a little bit more complex. I'm not saying but. He's going to delete the whole lesson from his mind. Okay. Let's say, take 2 examples. Example 1. Look, Kufachi, there's something that they say when they teach in Kalam and philosophy, because they're very nuanced topics. It's a very abstract. And please keep this in mind for all the time when we talk. They always say, al-mithal, or al-mathal, يقرب من جهة ويبعد من ألف جهة. Okay, why do they say that? What does it mean? They say when you give an example of something, why do you give an example? It's because there's something that you think as a speaker that is more clear to the mind of the listener than the point you're making. So you give an example because that's clearer from one aspect, and that's the aspect that you're trying to prove as a point. But of course, if you take the example from 1,000 other angles, because you're looking at the example in itself, you're going to say, but that's different in this way, and it's different in that way, and it doesn't apply here. Okay? So you have to concentrate on what we're trying to prove with an example. Okay? Anyways, so let's go back to the point. The point is, when an actor acts, they are responsible for their action and the effects of their action.
That's number 3.
Number 3. The example, someone takes an arrow, puts it in a bow, and shoots someone, and they hit them. Okay, and they injure them. Good? Okay. Example 2. They take the arrow and the bow from their friend. I tell my friend I want to shoot that person with your bow and arrow, so he gives me the bow and arrow, and I shoot the person with them. The means for doing the action came from my friend. And I still am the one who did the action. Who's responsible for the action?
Both.
Yeah.
But did your friend know that you
Yeah,
didn't
they
do
knew.
the action?
Yeah, they knew.
Then.
Okay. So now we're going to put legal systems aside. We're talking moral right and moral wrong. The friend is you have someone who shoots someone else with a bow and arrow, and they injure them. They shoot a snowman in the mind of their friend with a bow and arrow. How did I get in your mind? Example 1, you shoot someone with your own means. Example 2, you shot someone and you injured them, but with the means that came from someone else. So who's responsible? Morally, like bare bones philosophically and morally, the person who committed the act is responsible for the act. In this case, we would say, and they had an accomplice. The means came from someone else, but they're not equally responsible. Yes. Okay? There is a responsibility on the other person. But this person is responsible for their own action if both of them are free agents and this person decided that this is what I'm going to do with that. Yeah.
So are you basically saying someone motivated another person to shoot an arrow at a third
They're
person?
motivated.
It could be. That's if we want to add more complexity, I would tell you there's someone who just walked in, go and beat him up.
So wouldn't
He looked inside.
wouldn't the motivator be like they're both what do you call it? They're both guilty,
Alaykum assalam wa rahmatullah.
but the motivator wouldn't he be of a higher guilt?
It depends. If I have a power over you, yes, of course I am. Yeah, I give you an order and you have to obey the order. And if you don't, I don't know, I kill you, worst case scenario, or I stop being your friend, very weak. So this is a power that I have. So I'm abusing of that power to make you do that.
I'm just asking you because I want to clear in my head who is of more guilt, the people who ordered the killing of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, or
Okay, don't go there yet. Don't go there yet. I am keeping it very simple. Okay, we're going to go back. Yes, we are going to go back to all of that. It's all I'm trying to do with the rules. We're not looking at the evils yet. All we're trying to do with the rules is to say, basic rule number 3. If someone commits an act, they are responsible for the act and the effects of that act. 1. 2. If there's an intermediary, and the intermediary is fully conscious, fully aware, able to handle the entire knowledge and free to choose how they want to act, free to choose how they want to act, they are responsible for their own action. That's it. That's all I want. Who is more or less guilty? I'm not talking about that. The intermediary, the one who does the action at the end, that's the person I'm looking at. Are they responsible for what they did or not? Even though the means, even though the motivation, even though whatever came from someone else, at the end, are they responsible entirely for what they did or not? Yes, they are. 100% for their own behavior. Now, there might be a 50% or 80% on the other person too. But for this act from this person, if they were free to do so, they're entirely responsible for their own action. Okay? Okay. Yes.
Am I not also responsible for supplying you with
Yes.
the means to
Yes,
do
yes.
that?
Yeah. Or ordering.
Or
Ordering, which is even
I would
worse.
still be in the act that I did. I'd be 100% responsible.
100%. Yes. But they are also. The intermediary is the one who's responsible for that act. Because they could have chosen not to do it. Okay? Okay. 4. And I think we spent a little bit of time on that, so I don't want to impose it more, but there is no necessary link between something that is morally wrong, not befitting, and something that is harmful. Something may be harmful, it harms someone, but no one can say this is not befitting. For example, punishing someone when they deserve it. Okay? But if you punish in an exaggerated manner, abusive manner, of course, you fall under the first category. Now you fall under the non-befitting, and it's harmful. And something may be not befitting, but it's not harmful. You decide to walk naked in the street. Not befitting, not harmful. Right?
Pretty harmful.
Okay, it depends who you are. Okay, next, rule 5. So that's 4 rules. Rule 5. Now we're going to detail the rules. In fact, some of the rules that we gave until now, with those, you're supposed to be able to answer any question related to the evil of the world. But still, we're going to detail them more to create more specific categories. Hatta we have a lot more to work with. Okay? To be more nuanced and leave nothing for chance and ambiguity. Harm as equal punishment is not a moral wrong. So we use that as an example already. Someone does something very bad, and you punish them. That punishment, if it's equal to the harm they did, then there is nothing morally wrong with what you did. You may, as I said, someone may come back and want to argue. As a general basic human principle, this is accepted. Humanity has functioned with this forever. And that's why something like the Code of Hammurabi was considered such a huge deal when it was found, because it dates between 4,000 or 6,000 or 8,000 years. And right there and there it says, an eye for an eye, a hand for a hand, an ear for an ear. which says from the time of the first code of law that is documented in human beings, we see that they've been following this. Now, you may decide to apply charity. You may do extra. You may forgive. That's always better, that you can do better. But as a basic right, equal for equal, end of story. Okay, yes.
Like, yes, equal for equal, end
Yeah.
of story, right? It's morally right, but by law, you'd still get arrested if you like, or do something would happen to you if. What about religiously though? Like, are you still wrong?
Well, there's a way to apply it.
Okay.
Like religiously, you're supposed to apply it in a way that is still religiously okay. You don't just do whatever, however, and like there are laws. You're not supposed to do anything that may lead to chaos in society, for instance. Instability in society. If you do any of that, Islam does not agree. So if you start seeing, like maybe there was a time when it was a very primitive, very simple, rudimentary society, it's very different than, let's say, at the time of Imam Ali alayhi salam, when he starts creating a very clear legal system and a very clear executive branch to the government. And it's not a free-for-all where everybody just goes and says, this was my right, so I went and punched him in the face. No, you go to the judge and you prove your case, and they prove their case, and let's see what's the right retribution here. Okay? So, let's say, the Quran talks about this. Of course, what do you do? A killing for a killing? What if you killed someone by mistake? You go and kill someone and this person is a believer? So what do you do there? Okay, so there are a lot of cases where like there are loopholes and you have to go to a judge and a qadi, like who is shari'i, who knows Islamic law, and they'll tell you in each case what's the right way to do it. Okay? Retribution or justice for the oppressed is not bad. So, you have someone, nothing has happened to you, but you notice that something has happened to someone else, an oppressed, and so you do something as a retribution, you do something to reestablish that justice for that oppressed, for that person whose right or whose justice has been abused. That act is not considered a not befitting act, even though it may generate harm. Again, okay? So it's just another angle, same theme. 7. Sometimes someone may voluntarily or not, they may be harmed for the benefit of someone else. For instance, someone who sacrifices and pays charity, for instance. They willfully, freely, voluntarily decided to take money out of their own pocket and give it to someone else. In those cases, rewarding that person is very befitting. Okay, so now we're looking at the other angle. So we ought to reward the person who has been harmed, intentionally or not, voluntarily or not. Someone has been harmed for the benefit of another. So if I pay charity, it's because I'm helping someone else. For the benefit of another, I did something. I ought to be rewarded somehow for what I did. This is befitting. It reestablishes justice. I went out of my way, or I was taken out of my way to help another. For that, I should be rewarded. That reward is a good thing. It's a good thing to reward someone for having been harmed to benefit someone else. Okay? I think it should be intuitive, clear enough, if it's understood. Okay? Last 2 rules. These 2 go together, and the entire discussion next time we meet is going to have to be about these 2 rules. The first one, or let's say number 8, some benefits are only possible through harm. So, very easy example is you want to be in shape, you have to go work out. And working out is exhausting and difficult and painful, and you're sore, and you have to watch your diet, and it's all of that. Okay? Is there harm? Yes, there is harm. Some benefits are only possible through harms. Okay? You need to pass. Tomorrow there's an exam and you haven't studied. You're going to stay up all night and work. That's a harm. You have to. Yes, yes, of course. Yeah. You get that. Okay. So these are the simple examples. We're going to take a lot more complex examples the next time, but that's the rule. Some benefits are only possible through harm. Okay? I'm not going to say most or all benefits are possible through harm, are only possible through harm. But we may have to say that in the kind of world we live in. Anyways, that's one. And two, or the last one, the ninth rule. There's two things related to this last rule. It has to do with tests or tribulations or challenges or difficulties or examinations, or call them what you want. Tests, pardon me? Midterms. You can call them midterms. Sometimes they're finals. Tests are good in themselves, but they are only possible through harm. And this rule requires some talking, requires some explanation. The test itself, and it's linked to the previous rule. Some benefits are only possible through harm. Tests and tribulations are good in themselves. Why?
They lead to benefits.
Because they lead to the benefit, which is the previous rule. Some benefits are only possible through harm. Tests and benefits are one of those types. Tests and benefits are good in themselves, but they always require harm. Otherwise, it's not a test.
What about someone who's tested with wealth and all that?
That's a test. Then that's harm.
What is it?
Yeah, what do you do with it?
We're gonna.
But that's the test. But how is the
So
test
being
harmful?
patient and not spending it in the haram way when you see it being more attracted to you, the
That's the
patience
harm.
itself is a harm, like just staying and not doing them.
So what we're gonna do next time? It's a very good. All of these are very good reactions. That's exactly what we're gonna do. But right now it's kind of ambiguous, right? It's vague. We're gonna make it into very clear categories. We're gonna put this problem, because really it comes down to this problem of harm and test. Next time, and once we do that, it's going to be very clear. We're going to look at what the Quran says, specifically the Quran, to make it short, what the Quran says about this notion of test. And what does the Quran say about the notion of harm? Once we understand these two, then we will have all of the categories of things that people refer to as evil in the world, and we will see how everything falls in one of them, and none of them actually are evil, because they fall into one of the rules that we described today. Okay? Okay. And with this, we will inshallah complete this topic. And if you want to kill it to death, we'll spend one more week on it. Otherwise, that's it, and then we'll move inshallah to general prophethood right after that. Good? وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. I just have a question.
Yeah.
About the snowman.
For the ninth one, he said there's two types. You only said I think one.
I think he said the 8th and the 9th are related.
No. When you got to the ninth,
Yes.
you divided it again into two.
Yes. So, the ninth rule is 1. It's about tests and tribulations.
Yes.
1. Tests and tribulations are good in themselves.
Yes.
And the explanation, as we will say next week, is because they lead to benefits. Which brings us to the previous rule. Some benefits require harm. In the case of tests and tribulations, which are 1, good in themselves, 2, they are always harmful. A test and tribulation is always harmful. It is not a test and tribulation if it's not harmful. So if we're going to show that the entire point of our existence is to be tested, then we've resolved a lot of the issues by saying that tests and tribulations are good in themselves, but they need to be harmful. Which does not mean that they are evil. Okay? It's not qabih. It's not a not befitting. It's harmful, but it's beneficial. And the benefit is greater. Yes.
In the beginning, you said there's two definitions of evil, or
Qabih,
yeah, and harm.
darar. Yes.
Yeah, so
Dar.
if it causes harm, it's still considered evil, isn't it?
So that's why I'm saying when you confuse all the terms, we are going to jumble all of them up and call them evil.
Okay, so what we're doing is saying that evil is basically just moral wrong.
It has to come down to this. Because we have to force the other person to say, what do you mean by evil? And that's what we're going to do.
Okay.
We're going to explain our theory, and we're going to tell them, what do you mean by evil? And we've already given one full explanation, by the way. Allah rahatkum. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
What if
Which is like relative evil. We've already given all of that.
And we
Okay?
tell them there's two options. It's either one that it's harmful but not morally wrong, or it's morally wrong and sometimes harmful as well.
No, don't say the but. And to force them to say which one of these two are we talking about. Most likely, they will say both. We're going to show them that as a starting point, I agree with you, but down the road, we're going to see that things that are harmful are not necessarily bad. You may have things that are harmful and they're actually beneficial. So what's wrong with that? You can't just say because something is harmful, automatically it's one of the evils in the world. So I'm forcing them to change their definition. And that's why I said the problem is today, even in Arabic, they call it, shurur. Shubhat al-shurur or mas'alat al-shurur. Shurur is just evils. If you go back in history, a lot of our scholars, mutakallimin, they used to split those. And they say there are things that are al-qabih, la yasduru al-qabih. Okay? What is befitting and not befitting to come out of God? Can God produce not befitting? Does God produce non-befitting? These are the two big issues. One. And then they look at the problem, they call them mas'alat al-alam, which is pains, or what we're referring to as harms. Things that are harmful. These used to be treated under a general heading, but they were looked at as different issues. Today, everything is lumped together. And now whatever answer you give has to apply to all of it. Sorry, it's not all the same. Making you go through a test in one way is different than making you go through a test in a different way. In one of them, you control. Your test is your own free choice. Here, the test is you control nothing and you're forced to go through something very difficult and you've done nothing about it. Right? So it's an evil that's imposed on you. Imposed on you as, for instance, the evils that befall animals, the evils that befall babies, the evils that befall very innocent people. They've done nothing wrong and this is coming their way. Ash-sharr al-majani, sometimes they refer to it in Arabic. Okay? This is a problem, an evil that comes to you, and maybe I can explain it for someone else. I can justify it for someone. But for the baby who's done nothing and they get killed, it's a little bit more difficult to explain. And we're going to explain it with these rules. Okay, we're going to find the answer to this. What do we do with those cases?
When you said I think the sixth rule or the seventh, you said that punishing the people who oppress, or retribution,
Yes.
is harmful but not intuitive evil.
It's not. Yeah.
But so can you say that and the one on top of it is the same thing? The one
Yes.
on top of it is
They
punishment.
go exactly together. Yes. Yeah. But there's a reason why we're splitting them in that level of detail. How do we make it very clear when we're going to apply them? Okay.